This video is sponsored by Ritual.
If you thought last week's video was slightly oddball, unless you didn't see it, in which case you should see it, well, how about we go out of 22 with a schlocky bang and explore two genuinely terrible, possibly so bad they're good, Christmas horrors about a killer snowman who goes by the name of Jack Frost.
I only asked you for a smoke.
If you saw my video on killer clowns from outer space, again, go watch it if you haven't, you know exactly what you're in for. However, I cannot say Jack Frost deserves much credit for humor or ingenuity, because ultimately, despite the direct-to-video cover art scaring the shit out of me as a child, even though he looks nothing like this monstrosity, these two movies are bottom-of-the-barrel crudeness, designed for the drunk and morbidly curious.
Toasty!
I imagine most of you are at least familiar with the 1998 Michael Keaton family tearjerker of the same name that had the unfortunate timing of releasing a year after this direct-to-video lucid nightmare, but it's definitely not something you want to confuse if watching it with the family, because goddamn is it difficult to tell these two apart at times. While the 1997 horror flick left zero impact on the wake of its release, as it was essentially another forgotten bargain bin knockoff slasher of the 90s horror identity crisis, over the last 25 years, it has developed somewhat of a cult following in niche horror circles for its peculiarity, let's say. Jack Frost tells the story of a bloodthirsty serial killer responsible for 38 murders, who one night, upon being transferred to death row, manages to break free during a sudden vehicle collision. However, before he's able to escape, the vehicle the transfer van happened to crash into turns out to be a genetic manufacturer, transferring a volatile experimental chemical that explodes directly in Jack's face, causing his body to disintegrate and reintegrate his genetics with the snow, turning him into a sentient, seemingly unstoppable murderous snowman. I'm trying to say that with conviction. Yeah, despite how little actually happens, it does provide an elaborately silly backdrop to the cartoonish carnage that unfolds. From here, the story switches to the perspective of Sam Tyler, a timid, compassionate sheriff responsible for Jack's arrest, who, having lived in perpetual anxiety following Jack's threats of retribution, soon finds himself investigating unusual murders around town with the help of two mysterious FBI agents called Manners and Stone. While I can't in good conscience confidently recommend the first film due to its rather restrained delivery of its eccentric premise, if you're looking for a shameless, cringy laugh with your drunken mates during Christmas or New Year's, it certainly fills a hole, but only if you commit to its sequel, which I'll admit is surprisingly the better of the two films, heaven forbid. We will come to the sequel later in the video because I actually think it's better to treat Jack Frost as a two-parter, seeing as the sequel somehow manages to expand on the premise in a noticeably bonkers way. However, I'm not going to pretend there's a unique selling point behind this film to make it stand out amongst the ocean of other Christmas-themed crap. This is purely nostalgia talking.
Don't eat yellow snow.
Two ways to consider it are, what if a direct-to-video film parodied other direct-to-video films, or what if a serious Christmas horror were produced by the same people who make those algorithmic daytime seasonal rom-coms that flood streaming services this time of year. It's a twisted, mean-spirited lampoon of shitty Christmas movies, from the artificial and whimsical harmonious town to its quirky locals, to the spirit of Christmas being discovered in overcoming a Grinch-like serial killer. You see these kinds of movies all the time buried deep within the abyss of services like Amazon Prime. In fact, that's exactly where I found it, but I do appreciate that it doesn't try to act clever or above the quality of the content it presents, which I will concede is also a desperate attempt for me to say something credible about it. At this point, if you haven't done so already, please leave a comment below telling me your thoughts on Jack Frost, including what you think is the best Christmas horror film, and while you're at it, here are a few words from this video's sponsor, Ritual. So my dad and I are regular supplement takers because we don't always have the best diets when constantly on the go. I typically use individual vitamin C, D, and omega-3, however, I recently took on Ritual because they genuinely pride themselves on absolute transparency, quite literally in fact, by providing a multivitamin with no shady additives, fillers, or colorants, just 10 core nutrients to support the foundation of a healthier diet. Ritual is a delivered to your door monthly subscription where $1 a day gives you 10 high quality nutrients in one sexy looking capsule. No strings attached, no extra charge. Each product can be clearly and accessibly traced, as our website provides an efficient breakdown of the obsessively researched decisions for why each ingredient is used, including where they source their nutrients to even their environmental impact, with materials being 100% recyclable, their mealers being produced with recycled newsprint and plant fibers, and hell, they even use plant-based ink. These vegan-friendly, non-genetically modified, gluten-free, allergen-free, non-added sugar, delayed release capsules are even gentle on the empty stomach, which I can't say the same for some capsules I've used in the past, and include a mint tab to keep your bottle fresh instead of that weird fishy odor I've smelt in some other capsules. Ritual also sent me a bag of their essential protein, which is especially handy for me to take after yoga and dodgeball sessions, or just something to sip throughout the day because my calcium intake is pretty low instead of the unhealthy amounts of coffee I usually drink. Yeah, that's not a problem we need to get into today. So fill in the gaps in your diet today with Ritual, who are offering 20% off your first month by going to ritual.com/RyanH2O and using my code RyanH2O at checkout. Its conceit is essentially a ripoff of Child's Play by having a manic serial killer embody an inanimate object, but with a sci-fi twist instead of a supernatural one. It largely works thanks to Scott McDonald's performance as the titular Jack Frost. He's devilishly menacing and intentionally overindulgent, even throwing around some evil Bruce Campbell vibes in the beginning before channeling his inner Brad Dourif when injecting his dickish personality into the Snowman. Believe it or not, it contrasts surprisingly well with Christopher Allport's performance as Sam Tyler. He shows a sincere hint of nuance in his delivery of a PTSD-stricken sheriff who's in over his head trying to police a town he's so beloved in and way too forgiving of. Like, seriously, in both films, Allport shows decent range despite the material he has to work with. According to writer-director Michael Cooney, the movie had next to no budget, to the point the only reason Cooney even directed it was because they could not afford an experienced director. Just for context, Cooney's only other claim to niche fame was writing the wildly far-fetched psychological thriller Identity, which I covered before, and again, you should go watch that video if you haven't. The only other noteworthy character in the story is Agent Manners, who walks around with such intense smolder he could almost go toe-to-toe with Dwayne Johnson. His character was clearly beloved as he actually returns in the sequel despite technically dying in the first film, but let's not act like that's a problem worth addressing when we're talking about a budget film involving a killer fucking snowman. Hell, the sequel even acknowledges this supposed plot hole by having characters point out how different he looks because he's literally played by a different actor, but we'll come back to this nonsense shortly. Right, so I think I've said enough that we can probably get into spoilers surrounding the actual killing spree and the eventual discovery of Jack's weakness, because it's not like shooting water is going to do anything, and then of course we'll get into the sequel. When the killings start occurring around town, Agent Manners and Stone prompt Sam to instigate a curfew until the killer can be located. Manners and Stone are already seemingly aware of what Jack has become, with Stone in particular knowing a lot more than he lets on, while Sam takes an understandably long time to wrap his head around the inevitable reveal. There's a noticeably odd reaction to how the murders are initially perceived. Everyone looks more curious than disturbed, providing a similar tongue-in-cheek appeal as Rare Exports, where everyone just sort of accepts the reality of the situation except Sam, whose trauma does impact his response to the madness, and even more so in the sequel.
You don't reckon we should leave her up for the 12 days of Christmas then?
After learning conventional weapons are useless, the group attempt to melt Jack using hairdryers, eventually blowing up the sheriff's station after trapping Jack inside. However, the strangest yet most fitting discovery after realizing Jack can just reform himself is when Sam smashes Jack in the face with his oatmeal lunch made by his awkward son, which happens to contain fucking antifreeze. Looking beyond the fact that Sam's son nearly killed him, which I probably would have overlooked had I not remembered Fearless's his rant on the subject many years ago, you should go watch his videos on the topic, the group create a vat of antifreeze and lure Jack in after cornering and nearly killing Sam. This scene actually unintentionally got my body shaking because Sam is dunking around in a bath of dangerous chemicals with an open wound, and then later dunks his own son in when Jack's remaining part attacks, so we could just assume Sam and his son get horrible chemical burns, infections, and potential blindness as a result. Now, ending the first film on a somewhat serious point, there is something that compels me about the conclusion, where they bottle Jack into antifreeze containers and bury him before the state authorities arrive. The thing is, they do not technically defeat Jack, which naturally was a way to set up a sequel, but the idea of brushing the whole ordeal under the rug as opposed to trying to expose the chemical company's disastrous creation does play into this unspoken plot point about the two agents working under the orders of the chemical company rather than the FBI, who seem to be in cahoots with said chemical company. I could be totally wrong on this, or even just making it up in my own head as fanfiction, which I really hope is not the case because, well, this would be the last movie I would want to make a fanfic of. But I think it's somewhat implied that the company's goal is to manufacture a weapon for the government. If I'm wrong, obviously do correct me in the comments below. Not that it matters anyway, because it doesn't go anywhere, but I do like the insinuation of just trying to forget anything ever happened by burying the evidence from the public. So this brings us on to the sequel, which firstly, I'm impressed it even got one, and secondly, it really doubles down on the utter lack of quality of the first one, to the point it's almost making fun of itself. Jack Frost 2: Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman is a cartoon more than anything else, with performances and kills being dialed up to soap opera levels of cringe. This time, the story takes place on a nondescript island we can assume to be the Bahamas, where Sam and his wife Annie attend the wedding of his deputy and secretary Joe and Marla, brief characters from the first film, as well as use their vacation to help Sam recover from the increased trauma he has after the events of the first film. I immediately drew comparison to I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which also used an island resort for its sequel setting, as well as Broken Lizard's Club Dread, if anyone remembers that, which released 3 years later and had a noticeably similar annoying party character pissing off the guests before dropping the act when shit hits the fan. The thing about this guy, however, named Captain Fun, because fuck you, fun is mandatory on this island, is that he's later revealed to be covert security staff working for Agent Manners, who is now head security after being let go from the force. I'm pointing it out purely because the movie does so and then proceeds to never bring it up again like I'm about to do, but at least it gives you an idea as to how the stream of consciousness works in this movie. Things happen because why not? Let's not pretend we're here for anything other than a talking snowman killing people in different climate conditions. And how does this movie like to mock you with supremely bad CGI on top of the usual carnage? I will say there are bits of humor and creativity that actually work for me here. In particular, the fact that it subverts the hot, sexy, careless slasher character trope in favour of focusing on smart, middle-aged protagonists who feel distinctly out of place on this island. In a way, it's pretty much a boomer movie. There's even another meta joke involving Jack regaining his carrot and charcoal to make him whole again, akin to Jason from Friday the 13th obtaining his hockey mask to symbolically reignite his power. Simply put, the characters are just much more fun this time, with Sam's wife Annie, Deputy Joe, and Secretary Marla being given a significant boost in personality to make them endearing.
Maybe somehow their DNA got mixed up together.
No more Sci-Fi Channel for you, honey.
The same could be arguably said for Manners, but personally I preferred how overly serious and unself-aware he was in the original, compared to the beaten to death joke involving a stock dramatic cue that plays every time he suddenly appears.
Scary dude's already here.
Overall, I appreciate that it overtly makes fun of itself.
I now pronounce you totally fucking dead.
Anyway, getting into the premise, following from how the first film ends, the film opens by showing the FBI dig up the antifreeze bottles and return them to the chemical company, where Jack is revived following an inconsequential accident. From here, it showcases your typical regurgitated repetitive murder montage until Jack changes the weather to make the island snow. Don't question it, again, we're dealing with a killer fucking snowman, and eventually introduces two big game changers to impact the second half of the story. By the way, I would say spoilers again, but I imagine at this point you've already made up your mind. The first one is when they discover that antifreeze no longer works, as Jack has built an immunity due to his prolonged exposure. Thus, the group attempt to find a new weakness that, when revealed, you'll be too desensitized to even be surprised. The second twist, seriously, brace yourself, is that Jack can now somehow create snowball babies that even more viciously attack the islanders, leading to an apparent massacre that we never see due to budgetary constraints. They do us the sole favour of killing off Captain Fun, but then proceed to be ungodly annoying in their own right, even killing off Manners surprisingly early on in a weirdly creepy ambush scene. Although the one decision I find particularly odd during this encounter, despite everything we've come to see at this point, is to have Sam and Jack fade into the background, with Jack simply disappearing for no real reason, while Sam has a mental breakdown when he realises he cannot kill Jack. I suppose it was good to give the supporting cast something to do besides just be there, but after finally killing off all the snowballs and Jack returns, Sam's refocus into the film comes at the very tail end, just so that he can be the one to unceremoniously kill Jack. Now, there is a brief mention of Sam now having a telepathic link to Jack due to their DNA mixing in the antifreeze with Sam's open wound in the first film, but like with Captain Fun's alter ego, it doesn't actually do anything with this information, besides a contrived foreshadowing of Sam and Jack now sharing the same weaknesses. Oh, and that weakness happens to be bananas, because Sam is allergic to them. That's it. If you're waiting for me to follow it up with more reason, just know that I've started unwrapping my Christmas Volga as I record this.
Well, maybe when that happened, Jack inherited Sam's banana allergy.
Yeah, so they kill the snowballs with banana smoothies, and before Annie can successfully kill Jack herself, he violently consumes her, which I initially admired the balls on the film for killing off Sam's wife to spark him back into action, but if Manners is anything to go by, of course she didn't die. It ends with Sam shooting Jack with a banana tied to an arrow, causing Jack to explode, and allowing Sam and Annie to happily watch the sunset in peace. Just ignore the fact that the credits will try to make you think otherwise.